Hi, everyone, and welcome to Saturn Secrets. This is the podcast for the weekly astrology of the 8th of February to the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. Ooh. So, Valentine's Day actually has some really interesting astrology, which we're going to get to a little bit later because it's on the Sunday. We're going to start with the week. The 8th of February. The Aquarian energy this week is very strong. We have the stellium in Aquarius. This week we have the Sun, the new moon, we have Mercury, we have Venus, we have Jupiter and Saturn all in Aquarius together. So it's a full house in the Aquarian realm. And I have noticed for a lot of followers and subscribers that I've been talking to, many of us are suffering from insomnia. And I was thinking about this in the Aquarian energy, and sometimes it can be to do with overactive air energy, because when air energy is overactive in the sky, we're more partial to overthinking, anxiety, mental tension, restlessness. And because it's in a fixed air sign, sometimes the air can get a bit stale when there's so much going on in Aquarius. The best way that I have found to combat the insomnia is to do a couple of things that I'm just going to share briefly, because I know a lot of people are suffering from it, myself included. Opening your window and letting fresh air into your bedroom, changing your bed sheets, and another thing to watch out for is stale water in your bedroom. So if you have a hot water bottle, or you've left glasses of water in there, or you have flowers in there and the water has gone stale, change that. Clean your space, make sure that it's nice and fresh, really get in a fresh energy, because that will help combat any stale, stagnant energy of air in your own mind. Because you may need to meditate more, although I have to say meditation may be more difficult at the moment with such activated air energy. And because of Mars and Uranus being effectively a very airy planet, and Mars being a very aggressive planet in the earth signs, there's almost a feeling of trying to force ourselves to stay grounded, or forcing ourselves to make grounded change. Uranus in Taurus is not very grounded for air. Pluto there as well. Pluto's for Earth, Pluto there is also very transformative in Capricorn. The Earth energy is kind of intense at the moment. So staying grounded and staying down to earth is really quite tricky for a lot of people. I've also noticed, because Mercury retrograde is in Aquarius, a lot of people have been saying some really stupid stuff, such as women take up too much time in meetings because they're always competing with each other, whenever that really translates as women are being thorough and making sure that the job's getting done. Things like that, little prejudices within people can really come up when Mercury's retrograde in Aquarius. It can show people's stigma, people's prejudicial beliefs even. So that's something that's quite interesting to see in the news. There's also a lot of conversations about cryptocurrency, and there's also quite a few fascinating astrological conversations going on, and more of an awareness being raised with astrology, which is quite fascinating too. And because of the Mercury retrograde aspect, it's to do with the history. So a lot of us are seeing with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius what history is being brought up in terms of society and social change and social patterns and the way we used to do things, and maybe the way we'll take them forward. I'm a big believer, based on the stars at the moment, that there will be many people revisiting ancient astrology in order to bring it forward in life. So that's obviously going on in the background. Mercury only went retrograde last week, so we're still in the thick of it. And with all the heavy Aquarian energy coming up, there is a lot of things to note. Now, one of the things that's coming up this week that's really very stable and is quite grounding in itself is Saturn sextiling Chiron on the 9th. This is where you can understand your unique values, your unique responsibilities, and feel very secure with those. Heal any wounds surrounding authority, heal any wounds surrounding father figures or male figures in general. There is a conversation going on here that can show us where we feel a little bit wounded by the masculine energy, or by the hierarchies, or by the authorities. So this is quite a healing aspect, and I like this because it gives people a more confident platform to work on their goals from a place of security and self-advancement, because Chiron is in Aries. Chiron is the wounded healer, and Chiron is asking us to explain to ourselves why we feel like we can't do certain things, or why we feel like we cannot contribute to certain movements even, or groups of people or friendships where we feel like there are some wounds there that need to be fixed. So there could actually be some healing dynamics going on between you and your oldest friends, for example, or your oldest groups. I don't know if anybody saw that tweet that's going around with Jackie Weaver. It's a parish council, and they're having such drama. I think it was filmed back in December, but it is so funny to see those tensions of social groups. You know, they're a council. They're meant to be getting things done, but they're just arguing with each other. And I just sort of thought about the Aquarian energy at the moment and how that's made its way into the news based on the Aquarian, which is the internet, which is social media, and which is groups of people, and to an extent humanitarian values. And this was before we'd moved into the Aquarius energy, and it's when the Capricorn stellium was still going on. So it's really funny to watch. If you haven't seen that on Twitter, do search Jackie Weaver, because it is just so dramatic, and so the energy that we could actually be experiencing with Mercury retrograde, because groups of people can come to disagreements, or they can be brought to light. With Saturn sextile Chiron, I do feel that this is an opportunity to be the bigger person in any wounded dynamics or any wounded friendships. So we do begin the week off with the Sun Mercury conjunction in Aquarius at 20 degrees, and we will then on the 10th have Mercury trining the true node in Gemini. Now Mercury's done this before with the true node, and because of this, there is kind of a recap. Mercury did this before in shadow, and it was around the time of the inauguration, and I remember saying there could be some big news going on, and I think that news, there was a lot going on. I do think that the news itself was dominated by American politics, which I'm not really going to go into, but whatever was flagging to your attention there in terms of media, in terms of news, or in terms of conversations, there's a little bit of a revisit. There's maybe a few details get tweaked, there's maybe a few more insights, or there's maybe a bit of confusion about a promise that has been made, or revisiting it, or it might just not be presented the way it was before. Whatever that is for you, it is likely unique to you, whatever flagged for you around that time as information. We have on the 10th as well Mercury squaring Mars. So when Mercury is squaring Mars, there is a tension there. I have this natally at the moment. Mercury retrograde in Aquarius is squaring my Mars, but this is the Aquarian Taurus square that's going on in the sky at the moment. And it can really give you a lot of intense thoughts that could aggravate you. You could be rushed in your thinking, and you could be a little less able to listen effectively. When Mercury is squaring Mars in the sky, conversations, particularly on the internet, example Jackie Weaver's conversation, she's the only one I remember the name of, but do watch it if you need a laugh, because sometimes it's good to have a little bit of a light relief at the moment, and it is what reality TV should have been. But anyway, Mercury is square Mars in the sky. Mercury in Aquarius. Now it is retrograde, so there's a little bit of a numbing to this. It's almost as if it's not as heightened. Mercury square Mars, the tension, the confused thinking, there could be a sense of taking things the wrong way around the 10th, but I do feel like it's not the best day for information based on the Mercury trine true node, but the retrograde aspect of it. In terms of trying to move forward, today, the 10th, is just a day to listen. It's just a day to observe and write down your thoughts, and a couple of days later go back and see, do you really still think the same thing, or do you really still feel the same way that you did? Because chances are you might not. The next day we have the 11th. That is the new moon in Aquarius. Now, I will be doing a special video on this, so I'm not going to go into it too deeply based on the astrology, but on that day we also have Venus conjunct Jupiter. Now I love this. We didn't have one in 2020. We didn't have a Venus conjunct Jupiter aspect in 2020, and these are two beautiful benefic planets. It's a good omen. It's actually, especially in Aquarius, I have to say, it's a really good omen for your social life, for celebration. Now, as a lot of the world is in lockdown, not everybody is. For those of you that are not in lockdown, there is an element here of celebration, social activity, being able to get along with groups of people, being able to meet up with people. There's relationship opportunities, there's growth, shared dreams, for example. And 2 days later, we then have Mercury conjunct Venus. So that brings more good news. It brings a lot of optimism, broad-mindedness. It brings attention to our future plans, fun, and the bigger picture. And Mercury is also going to be trining the true node. As I said, it was trining the true node in the 10th. So there is kind of this hope for the future coming up this week that I do really like. And although the details might not be crystallized, they might not be crystal clear due to the retrograde aspect, it doesn't negate the fact that they're there. There is a lot of hope and optimism going on, I feel. And although Saturn and Venus conjunct in the background is definitely something to bear in mind, it actually is going to conjunct tomorrow, I believe, which is the 6th as I'm doing this. Although that's going on in the background, and there is a need to be very serious about our romantic relationships, about our money, and about our relationships to society in particular, and where we put our support. Although we are getting very serious about it, as we move away from that with a solid platform and a very responsible outlook, we can then build upon that with some joy, with some optimism, with some... I kind of take it as cautiously optimistic with Saturn in the background, but at the same time, there is a beauty to Venus conjunct Jupiter that, as I say, we did not see in 2020. And I think we felt that. I think we understand that intrinsically, that we didn't have that huge element of abundance and love going through the year. It was quite an intense year more than anything else. It's almost as if Venus and Jupiter decided not to meet in 2020 because there was so much other things going on. It did conjunct in 2019. In Aquarius, this really sets a beautiful tone. Some people actually do believe that this was the Star of Bethlehem. I know a lot of people talked about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction being the Star of Bethlehem. A lot of people believe that this was it. So in the sky, if you can see it, it will look absolutely beautiful. Really twinkly, really sparkly. And with this particular aspect, there is a great benefic swing to this. Now, as I say, many people that are not in lockdown will have amazing opportunities to socialize, to meet people. If you're in a country that is not subject to social distancing, if you are in a country that's subject to social distancing, I do feel that there may be news this week that it's the beginning of the end of that, at least for a while. I feel like there's a lot of hope. I feel like there's a lot of optimism. I feel like there's a lot of good news surrounding socializing, because that's Aquarius, right? And yes, Saturn's in the background, and Saturn next week is going to square Uranus, and there's a lot of pressure with that, but I do feel like there's reason to be hopeful this week, if only cautiously optimistic. And speaking of squares, there is also a square between Venus and Mars, which is kind of the lover and the warrior. It can be regarded as love-hate, but for a lot of people, this can result in tension. In fact, in the skies, this results as tension, but tension can be good and tension can be bad. Sometimes we like tension. We like a buildup of tension in a film we're watching, or we like a buildup of tension with a potential love interest, or in a dynamic where there's a lot of chemistry, for example. Chemistry is tension. Chemistry and passion are tension. Of course, the swing side of this is that there could be frustration, there could be annoyance, and many issues for some people with lovers come to a head, particularly if one is wanting to socialize and one is wanting to possess. There can be issues with Venus and Mars coming up of possessiveness. There could be jealousy raising its head in some regard, or there could be expansion, there could be open-mindedness, and the more freedom that we have in relationships, freedom is typically based on trust, you know? So with Venus squaring Mars, there could be a lot of passion. There could be a lot of sensual energy, which is beautiful for Valentine's. Or as I say, it could be tension raising its head in a relationship where there's not good communication. But Mercury and Jupiter are conjunct on Valentine's Day, which to me is saying there is good news. There's optimism, being open-minded with another person. Of course, depending what aspects fall in your chart, this could be tricky for you, but you can still choose to tap into this energy, to choose charm, to choose open-mindedness, and to be broad-minded. I do feel like for a lot of people where Venus conjunct Saturn brought up some relationship issues for them or some dynamics, this is actually a beautifully healing time for you, because the aspects to Jupiter are giving you this power to attract new energy into your life. In fact, the 11th, if you're single or you're looking to improve a relationship or improve a financial situation, what I will say is with the new moon in Aquarius, it's a beautiful time to set intentions, because in this channel we talk a lot about setting intentions. Astrology isn't what happens to you necessarily, it is the weather prediction. You know, you choose what you wear when you go out into the weather. You choose how you approach it, or if you approach it at all. You know, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's choosing not to engage with tension. Particularly on the 10th, I have to say, don't engage in tension if you feel like it. The next day is a very different story. There's a very different switch going on. So let's talk about Valentine's Day in general. Mercury conjunct Venus and Mercury conjunct Jupiter, Venus conjunct Jupiter. There's a lot of Aquarius energy happening on Valentine's Day. The moon will be in Pisces and Aries. For those of you in the UK and Europe, I'm not that good at time zones, but for the United States, across the pond, it is going to be mostly a day of Aries energy in the moon, and for the UK, etc., it's going to be Piscean energy. So for everyone, it's going to be both. So I'll just stick with this. The moon in Pisces is going to conjunct Neptune, and you may feel this on the 13th, you may feel this on the 14th, and this can make you really very sensitive. It can actually make you pick up some wrong signals, or it can help you really play into the energy of romance. It's a tricky one if you fancy a drink. There can be a really strong overdoing it element to alcohol or any kind of substance. So be careful if that's what your Valentine's plan is. When it moves into Aries, the moon is going to be conjunct Chiron, and this can add a little bit of emotional healing and a really strong sense of this is how I feel. I like that. I like that sense of this is how I feel. I'm okay with how I feel. And for a lot of you, that's actually really good identity shadow work. If you have emotions within your shadow that you really do not like, you know, jealousy or pride or envy or any kind of fears that you have, this is a time to look at them, especially with the Aquarian energy, without judgment, and say, it's okay that I feel this way sometimes, particularly in a romantic situation. It can sometimes be a little bit of an emotional surrender to whatever's going on at the time. Not necessarily giving in, but a little bit of emotional surrender, which I like to see with that Chiron energy, because Chiron is the wounded healer and loves to heal others, can heal others, but could never heal themselves. And when it touches the moon, there is a sense of trying to heal the shadow aspect of yourself, trying to heal who you are, your identity wounds. Taking stock of who you are is a big thing with that, and choosing who you want to be as well. So when the moon is conjunct Pisces, though, there is a lot of romance in that type of energy. There is sometimes an ability to be really sensitive and pick up the wrong signals, particularly with Mercury retrograde, so do be wary of that. But for the most part, the conjunction between the Venus, Mercury, Jupiter and Aquarius stellium, the conjunction there is just gorgeous. It's just beautiful for celebration. It's just beautiful for relationship opportunities. It's actually a wonderful time for growth in relationship. You know, Jupiter expands. So whatever energy you're putting out will be expanded. It may be that you and a romantic partner, or you and a friend, for example, try to commit to something together, try to commit to a charitable cause, try to commit to something worthwhile. I know that a lot of people describe that in the twin flame journey. I don't promote the twin flame journey on this channel just because I don't agree with it per se. I think that a lot of the time that's a trap to get people to stay in toxic relationships that are unhealthy. I don't believe a twin flame relationship should be unhealthy. It just doesn't make any sense. At least not to me. If that's your thing, work away, but I don't promote it here because I think sometimes people confuse it with personality clashes and toxic relationships, unhealthy bonds. So we don't do that here. But I know that in the dynamic, a lot of people say they unite later on for a joint cause to humanity, which is a lovely idea. I think a lot of people could make, really deepen relationships by giving back to the world, because that takes away a lot of shadow work surrounding envy or jealousy, a possessiveness that exists in relationships. Aquarian energy typically likes to be quite social and likes to be quite humanitarian and giving. So sometimes whenever we have Venus there and Jupiter there in particular, the more that you give out to the world, the more you get back. And giving out as a pair, as a dynamic, it's definitely a beautiful thing, especially this week. So I do feel like there's some good news coming in around Valentine's Day. I do feel towards the end of the week in general, there seems to be some kind of news that is hopeful. I do feel like there is some kind of announcement or some kind of conversation, and it could be to do with the internet, it could be to do with socially reconciling with society, it could be to do with advancing society, humanitarian causes. There is a lot of news this week in terms of humanitarian causes. That was always going to be the case with the astrology. And there's a lot of generosity. I will say this. There's a lot of generosity towards humanitarian causes. Sometimes we can see this in large donations. Sometimes we can see this in celebrity donations, for example. I think it's also very interesting that when Aquarius rules the online and we've got the Mercury retrograde and we have huge planets, especially the planet of karma, Saturn, in signs like Aquarius that is to do with the internet and it is to do with social justice. I find it interesting that energy brought about announcements such as, news from people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos stepping down, I think, was really interesting. Partly because he is, I think, a Capricorn, as far as I'm aware. I think he's a Capricorn, and we've just moved out of the Capricorn era and into the Aquarius era. And there's a little bit of a question mark over that, I have to say. I kind of wonder if there's more news to follow there. But it is interesting to see all these Aquarian themes take precedence in the news. In fact, they've taken precedence more than the pandemic lately. A lot of these interesting advancements in technology and the internet and the stock market, for example, which is a very big theme about Saturn and Uranus squaring, which they will square next week. So I'm going to save that for next week. That is building up. Another thing to think of for the future podcast is that Mars trining Pluto is building up, and that's not as big a theme this year. That's not going to be the case for many occasions, such as the Saturn-Uranus square. But I do like this. I do like this groundedness that we're working towards. Mars trine Pluto is also very passionate. There could be passion and dedication building in relationships and towards projects, which is beautiful to have going on in the background of Valentine's Day. Even if Venus is square Mars, Mars is doing a thing this week that feels either very passionate or very frustrating, and it will depend on your relationship status, your relationship health, etc. That will be dependent on your own circumstances, but it's something to think of in the background. One final concern that I just want to air is that when the moon in Pisces is conjunct Neptune, which will be the 13th, 14th, although these days are really very social, as I did say, Neptune is associated with viruses and infections and things. So just do be wary that even if you have opportunities to be more social or there's good news, is that there is a susceptibility with that particular moon transit. And that's just something to bear in mind of in the background. Everyone's being everyone's aware of these risks and things, but I just thought I would make that something to consider, as well as be careful with your alcohol if you fancy a tipple on Valentine's Day, as I'm sure many people will. You know, you don't want it to get to a point where you chuck your drink on your partner, especially if it's red wine, because that is hard to get out. But that is just something to bear in the background. Hopefully you won't take that Venus square Mars energy and put it into something aggressive. Hopefully you'll take it into something passionate and constructive. Because Venus and Mars, even in a square, passions can really build. There can really be a beautiful burst of intimacy and desire and all those different types of things. But it just depends, as I say, what you do with that particular transit. So that is the astrology for the 8th of February to the 14th of February. Stay tuned for the new moon in Aquarius special. And I will see you soon. Bye.